this music has been my motivation. It's the thing I've turned to, the thing that has given me inspiration. It moves me to the core, exactly the same as when I was a small boy. Most of the players that came to Chicago that were really vital came from what they call the Mississippi Delta, the Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters. They played in bands and they played in clubs. They had actually a way to become sophisticated, I think, and they had competition. The guys would come up and they'd go and visit Muddy in his club and they'd see how sharp he was and the kind of suits he was wearing and the kind of money he was getting, and they'd have to revise their act and it would speed up the process and bring out the best, the absolute best in everybody.
In 1945, Muddy did come to Chicago. He was a little funny little thin guy, talking with country boy, you know what I mean? Well, I was too, but I'd learned 2 streets and he didn't know one. And he taken a like to me, and we just started practicing, sitting around home practicing and jamming. And between his style of singing and what he was playing, I kept fit him in and made a style. We really created a style for him. And then eventually, little Walter, he came to Sunland Slim, brought him to Chicago.
I would have been 18 or 19, and I got a call from this guy, Mike Vernon. He said, there's a great opportunity for you to come and play with Muddy and Otis. I tried my best to be cool, but I was just in bits. All I can remember is them dancing. I remember them because we all did it it was over in about an hour. It was so fast. And these guys had suits on that were like silver silk, big suits. And when they were listening to the playback, they danced and they held their trousers up. So that, you know, they were big trousers, and they would do these kind of fancy footsteps, holding their trousers up like skirts, you know. And it was just breathtaking. He meant a great deal to me, and his music still does, probably more than anybody else's. It was the first, really, that got to me, and it still is the most important music in my life today, is the music of Muddy Waters. To come back and do this blues album and these tours actually required me to study more in depth than I've ever done before, but I really, really found out a lot of things about what made his guitar sound like, and it would be the actual way he held his hand, the fact that he would put a cap on at a certain fret that would make the string respond in a different way than if you tried to play it by barring it with your finger, you know, that would... A lot of in-depth stuff that is actually makes me very grateful for the fact that I've taken that time to find out that much.
My dream was to watch the Giants play the music like it's supposed to be played, which was Howlin' Wolf, Muddy Waters, T-Bone Walker, whoever I could see there in Chicago, because I got word that if you go there, you'd get a chance to see God knows who, because they would sooner or later come to Chicago or was living there.
It's the most primitive music I had ever heard. He was actually someone that I would have always avoided trying to think about bringing into a repertoire sort of thing because of the impossibility of it. And the emotion and the passion. That London session, he came into London at a time when it was very kind of hip and desirable to be thin and small. And there was this huge man, so we must have been like, you know, it must have been like Lilliput.
Well, let's, all right, let everybody get together there and we'll try to make it.
Let's try it.
See if I can do it without you. Oh, man, come on. You ain't got nothing to do but count it off and change.
He actually, when there's that thing of him teaching me how to play Little Red Rooster. And when that was happening, it was awful. I wanted to just die because he kept grabbing my hand. He grabbed my wrist and shoved it up and down the neck of the guitar. And he was angry. He was very angry.
Let's get on.
Little Walter was a very, very powerful influence on me. There was something in his attitude to the whole thing which gave me access because he didn't seem to have much skill in any area, even the harmonica. It was very crude, but he had so much emotion put into that it meant, there's room here. There's somewhere I can go with this. I don't have to have fantastic facility if I channel everything I feel into this. An album came out on Pi International called Folk Festival of the Blues, and I think it was Muddy and the Howling Wolf and Otis Spann and this young guy called Buddy Guy, who had probably not been in Chicago long. In this first track, this Ooey Baby, there's a guitar solo that just was the end. He just trashes everybody in sight and says, this is brand new. And it's a beautiful thing to hear, even today. It just comes out of nowhere and it's like breaking glass.
I learned how to play for the love of the blues music that I play. I have so much fun when I play with him, you know, and I tell him, just like I tell B.B. King, I really don't want to play with you. I want to watch you play so I can steal the licks, you know. He's so creative.
There's an intriguing time signature in that, which comes up in a lot of like Terraplane and Milk Cow, that reoccurs in Son House's music and Charlie Patton music as well. That was one of the things that I could latch onto. I had this notion about I could take things out of the Delta Blues and make them modern, you know, that there was a way of making a riff out of that. And I just took that and made the riff for Crossroads. It was an access that I felt quite proud of at the time. And actually gave me a connection to the whole thing and made it come to life. Robert Johnson was the king of that era. And, you know, if you listen to everything else that came after, everybody took some of his playing. In terms of the spirit and the soul of what he gave to the blues, it was the first thing that shook me up. He was a tortured soul. And there, you know, that's where it got me, you know, because there was an element of that in me that I could identify with. And I had, that I was driven, you know, there was no doubt I'd been driven and was driven at the time that I heard that record. So much of me would identify with that. And then there was the fact that, you know, it was like a black James Dean. And who wants James Dean when you've got Robert Johnson? The music that kept calling me back and still does, is the music from the Mississippi Delta. I found out sort of after the event that the music I was always going to be attracted to most powerfully was from a very small region, and I would find out it was regional with my own ear, by the music.
I was about 12 years old. I made me a guitar at a little place called Vance, Mississippi there. I made me a guitar on the wall out of broom wire, which you sweep with a broom. I ripped it off a fella named Snooky Pride, hit me to that. Ripped a wire, about a 6 feet piece of wire off of your mother's broom and put bottles at the top and bottom for a bridge. You can tighten it up and then get a ding, ding, ding sound and make it sound like Robert Johnson. I lie in bed at night, I wake up and think about what I could do to get a sound or hear a sound, and I would try it, try to find it, get as close to it as possible. And it just went from there, just kept on doing it. That was with me. I wanted to do it, so I did it.
We all migrated to Chicago, Houston, or LA or somewhere to record. But if you would go back and get our background, we all lived in those little one-room country shacks somewhere down there. And all of us about the same, whether you lived in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, where. It's you had to chop the cotton and follow the mule and go 3 months of school and come out and go to work.
When I first left Indianola and went to Memphis, I never dreamed that 120 miles could be so far. To me, it was like going almost to another world. But I'd heard a lot about Memphis and the musicians around Memphis. And when I got to Memphis, I got a job and was able to be on the streets, Bill Street, like on the weekends. That's when you would get a chance to hear all of these great musicians. And being on the streets on a Friday and Saturday evenings, just in the park there, you would hear some of the best music ever. And it was sort of like going to college. I learned so much by hearing guys on the streets playing. And sometimes they call it ballyhooing because they're going to play in one of the little clubs. And so just playing on the streets was their way of advertising.
In the way that you can play the guitar, the Texas thing has got more of a jazz thing, and therefore kind of a more grown-up thing in a way. There is definitely a rhythmic difference. There are people that know how to play a Texas shuffle and a Chicago shuffle. The drummers that know the difference. There were a couple of people that had something that I didn't hear anywhere else really taken to its furthest development, which is the finger vibrato. T-Bone and Lowell Fulson, people, they stopped short of that for some reason. T-Bone would play a lot of phrasing, but he wouldn't necessarily end up on a note and make it, give it that vibrato thing. That's what it was, wasn't it? And it's almost like a voice, when any voice, if you're going to hold and sustain a note, at some point you put a vibrato on it. And the great players, and BB is one of them, has the kind of vibrato that you would die for.
I guess I've always been thick-headed and had stupid fingers. I could never do like the kids do today, play like this person or play. Since I could not play like them, I would say if I could play that, I wouldn't play it the way he's playing it. I'd play it this way. And I think that's how I started to develop a style, because I couldn't hear well enough or play well enough to play like these people played that I loved so much.
I was in this little band called the Roosters. It was the first band I was in. Someone had this single by a man called Freddie King called Hideaway. And on the B-side was a song called I Love the Woman. And in the middle of that there was a guitar solo which did for me what the Buddy Guy thing did for me when I first heard that. It was like, wake up, wake up, wake up. This has happened. This has already happened somewhere in the world. You're already years too late. But there's a chance. There is a chance that you might be able to learn how to do this if you play your cards right. It was that thing again with the vibrato. Holding the note and making it sing like a voice. And he was great to play with. He had a way of forcing you to do your best, you know? And he'd just throw you in the deep end. Otis Rush, he's another one that got the vibrato thing and bending, you know, bending the notes. And I think he played with his fingers. There was always that thing about people that played with their fingers that just had a more vibrant tone from the string. It was the flesh to the string that would just make it sing more somehow. And he had a beautiful voice and a lisp. So the lisp was part of it as well. When I first heard my voice singing, for instance, on that John Mayall album, it just sounded so thin and small. And really, if I'm going to be a blues musician, I want to be a blues musician, I need that maturity and those years. Because all my heroes were men. They weren't boys. You know, I wasn't interested in boys' music. I was interested in men's music. So I couldn't see me being a singer until I had grown up in a way. So all of my music came through the guitar. All of the expression I had would come through the guitar. I went off on a kind of tangent, which took me a long time, about 20 years to come to the end of. I went out on a loop and came back, because I'd always come back. I would always dig out a Muddy Waters record or a Howlin' Wolf record or a Robert Johnson record and constantly surprise myself with how powerful this stuff really is when you've listened to everything else, you know, when you've been everywhere else. And for me, I always come back.